Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Day 3. So, what we're going to get into today is we're going to overview what we talked about yesterday, just to sort of build upon the lesson of that practice, and then discuss another sort of key ingredients that will support the Om practice, but doesn't necessarily involve the Om. And that's breathing into the lower lobes of the lungs, diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing, and we'll discuss why that matters. Essentially, it provokes tranquility within the body, which is necessary before we embark on any meditative journey. And it's such a powerful counterbalance to the innate stress involved in living life. So, what did we talk about yesterday? We talked about the 4 fundamentals of a meditative practice. And the reason these are fundamentals to all forms of meditation is because meditation is about internalizing our awareness, right? Our attention. And to do that, to really internalize our attention in a significant way, demands that we have an extraordinary degree of control, not just over our bodies, but over our minds. And that's a skill that isn't often discussed of or taught in our upbringing. And so we have to learn it, for the first time when we engage or when we become curious of this practice. And so those 4 fundamentals were: you have to build a strong posture. That strong posture, the value of it is twofold. It is to provoke a little bit of stress in the body. As meditators, the philosophy or the mythology is that all things are divine, and a huge source of our pain and our grief and our strife within our moments is because we tend to identify or define things as good and bad. And while that makes sense to all people, because it is true in a very rational way, to a meditator, under the umbrella of the mystic mind, all of life is beautiful, good or bad. And when we can adopt that mentality, we are elevated into a unique zone of peace and embrace. So we provoke that stress to expose ourselves to that stress, to hopefully befriend that stress. And that's what the posture really does. And then it wakes us up so that we're alert for our practice. The second fundamental was stillness. You have to be still, because any form of movement is proof that you have reacted in a negative way to a certain sensation in the body. If you smack your lips or itch your forehead or adjust your shirt, you were bothered by that experience and you moved to change it. But again, the mythos of the meditative mind is all things are divine. So if my shirt is hanging in a strange way on my body, that is divine, and there is no need for me to adjust it. There's a little tickle on my brow. It is also divine. And again, there is absolutely no need to break my practice, externalize, come to the surface of my body, itch it for a second, and then bring my hand back down. All right? All within the realms of practice. In life, adjust your shirt. In life, scratch your face. But when you're in practice, you're really trying to adopt this different sort of persona. So stillness was the second. Then deep breathing, which is what we're going to sort of detail today, was the third, which creates a counterbalance to the stress provoking of the first 2 steps. So you breathe deeply, create a little peace in the body. And the final, most difficult step was to replace all thinking and all analyzing and all judging with feeling. That if you can just feel openly, in time, in moments, you'll find that the mind has sort of dissolved, and in the absence of that inner dialogue or that inner monologue, what we often experience is a great peace, a great inner quiet, which is a huge part of the joy of this practice. And so those are the 4 fundamentals. We also talked about meditation as art. I found this really beautiful quote by Terence McKenna, who was an advocate of the psychedelic world. He advocated the use of mushrooms and DMT to open the mind through external substances and really explore the shamanic vision of the mind and the spirit. And his quote was that the role of the artist is to save or protect the soul of mankind. And so if we conflate this with a meditator, let's say someone like the Buddha or someone like Shiva or Vishnu or Krishna or Vivekananda, any powerful meditator, if their practice is art, and if we can agree that art's purpose is to save the soul of mankind, as you sit, as the Buddha sat underneath the Bodhi tree and held his body in this really majestic, symmetrical, enticing, and beautiful way, as he breathed a breath of peace, as he held his face in perfect contentment, his eyes half open to the world but half closed to the world, he provoked through his imagery a spirit. And that imagery is so provocative that especially in a city like LA, you see Buddhas everywhere, and we are naturally enticed by it. We see it in restaurants, we see it on the side of the road, we see it painted on the walls, because this practice is art, because it protects the transcendental message. So when you hold your body and you hold your breath, think of it as art. Curate it the way an artist would curate their piece. Compose yourself with that same concern, and I think it'll do something for you. And so those were essentially the lessons of yesterday. Any challenges that arose, I'm confident they had something to do with boredom, impatience, confusion, frustration, discomfort. And again, this whole process of controlling ourselves is so that we can embrace that which we naturally sort of push away. All of these mental sort of negative phenomenon are the things that we ought to embrace, and we'll find that our practice has momentum for it. Groovy. So what are we going to work on today? We're just going to detail breathing. Before we enter our practice, before we enter our techniques, it's nice to prepare ourselves, to present ourselves, better said, to the process, to the experience. And so as we present ourselves to a practice that orbits peace and tranquility and quiet and silence, it's nice to build that quality within us first, as counterintuitive as that seems. And the way we can do that is physiological. If you breathe into the lower lobes of your lungs, if you breathe into your belly, which takes some time to learn, the lower lobes of the lungs, the nerve receptors there are directly tethered to the parasympathetic nervous system, to the part of your body that signals peace into tissues and signals tranquility into your brain. So the lower lobes of the lungs are literally there to tell your brain and your thought process, this moment is okay. And so if you take the time to breathe into that space of your body, even if your brain is telling you it's dangerous, over time, those conflicting messages will provide at least enough questioning for you to lean into tranquility when your instinct is to lean into reactivity. And that's sort of the whole goal. When we approach our state of mind or psychology through the physiological, what I've found is it provides us a greater degree of confidence that we actually have control over our thought process. And then the practical point is when we get in the habit of breathing into the lower lobes of the lungs, and that becomes our reflex, our mental reflex becomes tranquility. And then we find that we are less inclined to react egregiously or react unconsciously in the world, in our actual lives. And so it's sort of this double benefit. It beautifies our meditative process and it pacifies our sort of lived experience. Cool. So with that, just a couple nuances. The psychological experience is tethered to the physiological. That gives us a sense of control over the mind. But what is intangible within us to the yogis is the soul, right? And so while we are controlling our minds through our bodies, the yogis believe that the great point of this process, this practice, is to sort of transport ourselves to the other side of reality, that which is not bonded to the physical, and that it would be Atman. And so when you touch that state of peace in your practice today, at the beginning of your practice, I would like you to consider, if you're inclined to these ideas, that what just happened is you took a step towards the truly intangible. You leaned into the spiritual, into the light of the otherworldly. And that's just a beautiful way of enriching the concept of what you're doing here. Last little bit, again, philosophically, instead of just thinking that I'm breathing into the lower lobes of the lungs, I'm activating my nervous system, and for that reason, I have peace. I think that diminishes the quality and the complexity of the human condition. If we fall too far into this sort of hyper-pragmatic idea of meditation, it cuts away the spiritual artistry of the process. And so to empathize with the yogic mind and the meditators of the past, when you experience that peace, they didn't know that their lungs contained nerve receptors that activated, serotonin uptake in their brain, and in that encouraged the release of positive hormones in the body. They just experienced peace by intuitively interacting with their body, conversing fluently with the languages of sensation. And so when they experienced that peace and when they experienced that sense of calm, they felt that that was essentially an encounter with a deva, and an encounter with a divine God, a divine positive force. And so they really learned to honor it and to worship it and to adore it. And they would go back into their practice and trek back into retreats to build relationships with these intangible, positive phenomenon. And the same was said with the negative phenomenon. When fear arose, when insecurity arose, they didn't know, again, it was the surge of stress hormones in the body, but they believed it was asuras, that it was demons. The lore of the Buddha when he achieved his enlightenment was that Mara, the god of fear, came and presented himself as an army of demons and as seduction, as women, to entice him out of his process. And so he went after that momentous evening and shared his experience, and the legend unfolded from there. But what really happened was he was sitting there underneath a tree under the pressure of his own commitment, and encountered a lot of inner fear and overcame it. And again, the legend was that fear was an actual demon, a demonic force. And so when we practice today, what we're really sort of forging is a ritual that before we ever get into our work from this day on, we will encounter the deva of Shanti, the deva of peace, which again is facilitated by breathing into the lower lobes of the lungs. But if you think of it that way, it will pull out or extract the beauty of your practice. It will make it more artistic. And in that, in line with Terence McKenna's sort of idea of art, it will save at least your soul, and your example will remind the world that there is still magic in life, and that there is a soul or a transcendent message to protect and to sort of share. Cool. So let's get into this, everyone. Happy you're all here. Day 3, strong seated position, beautiful artistic symmetry. And on your own, take a second and run over the 4 fundamentals. What's the first thing you have to do? What's the second thing you have to do? The third and the final. So posture, number 1. Hips tilt forward, spine lengthens. Take the bend out of your elbows. I know it's annoying. It provokes stress, which was the point, right? We expose ourselves to stress by holding our bodies in certain ways to, in time, embrace it. Hands are open, palms face up to the sky, your jaw is shut. Now take the time and attempt to feel your fingertips as tingling, buzzing, and vibratory. And this is blood flow. And so in the framework of societal value and cultural worth, feeling your fingertips and the blood flowing in them is irrelevant. But when you do take the time to feel your body in such an intimate way, what you'll find, at least, is that it's pleasurable. That the innate experience of existing in flesh is nice. That little buzz in your fingertips is actually reminding your brain as an organism, I still have fingers, therefore I still exist. Bring a random finger to each thumb. And so now that you've established your mudras, your little hand gestures, the ornaments of your posture, the first fundamental is set. Second fundamental immediately occurs, stillness. Now, no matter what, any movement is externalization. Any movement is reactive. And if you react, you're responding to the idea that something is negative, something must change. But that limitation creates frustration and stress. So we counterbalance that with breathing. Breathe into the belly, breathe slowly, patiently. And the fourth step is feeling the breath, feeling your body buzz and vibrate, feeling discomfort if it does arise openly, replacing all judgment, all analysis, all fear with the willingness to feel. And so what we're going to do for the next 5 minutes is, if peace emerges, if a remarkable level of peace or a noticeable level of peace builds up in your body, so much so that you acknowledge it. Oh, wow. I just feel like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Oh, wow. This wave of tranquility just came out of nowhere. If that does happen to you, I'd like you to bring your hands to heart center patiently and repeat in the mind, Om Shanti. Acknowledge the encounter with the deva of peace. And then bring your wrists back to your knees, fingers back to the thumbs to resume your work. If nothing happens, don't bring your hands to heart center. Don't acknowledge the fantasy of peace or the hope of peace. Only acknowledge the actual encounter. 5 minutes here. If peace came, it came. If it didn't, it didn't. No expectations. And so from here, we'll chant the Om to facilitate activating the lower lobes of the lungs. Master your inhale as you breathe in, swell into the belly. Feel the stomach distend. Feel the rib cage widen and thicken from left to right, from front to back. Breathe all the way up into the chest, but avoid the upper collarbone. Once the belly is expanded and full, open your mouth, chant your mantra. Chant the Om quietly today. And as you exhale, pushing air out of your vocal cords and into the Om, keep the spine tall and feel the belly pull in. And so you're detailing the physiology of making a sound with your voice. Full expansion and organized contraction. Last bit of advice, remember the fourth fundamental. As you curate your body's movements, feel it. The subtle pleasure of resonance in your chest. The joy of singing. You're manipulating the physiology of your organism to facilitate unnatural levels of tranquility in the mind. You're adjusting the physical to affect the immaterial. The more you breathe into your stomach, the more you'll activate the lower lobes of the lungs, which means the more you'll activate the parasympathetic nervous system. This aspect of the central nervous system will inform your brain that this moment is trustworthy. Positive neurotransmitters will be taken up by neurons, and all of a sudden, your worldview will shift. And so you're really learning how to play the organism that you are. You're learning how to manipulate the creature. Antakarana, the divine instrument. And so what I'd like you to do now is focus on that sense of peace as you chant the mantra, which is an exhale. Focus on the buzz of that tingling pleasure, the comfort of that relaxing body, and the human joy of vocalizing a song. Let it be spiritually meaningful instead of practically meaningful. Let this feed the artist, not the husband, not the wife, not the citizen. Back to the four fundamentals, attempting to pull this into our working memory. Everyone, lengthen your spine gradually, straighten your arms slightly, connect to your mudras. Notice that surge in wakefulness and confidence. That a strong posture stabilizes the mind into a deeper experience of presence. Of course, hold your stillness. Slow down your inhales to feel the belly swell. And chant 3 more perfect ohms. Perfect because there is the absence of insecurity, absence of impatience, a surge in interest, a surge in joy. 3 more ohms, and then hold silence, feeling the body. Control the body to control the mind. Slow down your breath, the breath of peace. And notice to do that, you have to let go of the world, let go of your schedule right now, let go of your routine. The four fundamentals encourage such acute control because letting go of our lives and ourselves takes more control than anything else. And the success of your practice, whether it's chanting, whether it's breath work, whether it's mindfulness, hinges on that ability to let go. And so again, slow down your breath and feel what that demands is an abandoning of the world you know. Abandoning concern, abandoning responsibility. And as we let our lives drift away for a moment, what comes to replace it is presence and peace. Bring your hands to heart center at this point. Again, lengthen the spine. Notice any impatience in the breath, a quickening. Counterbalance, slow it down. Notice tension in the face, a churning of thoughts. Come back to feeling. We have to fight for this peace. As artists, protecting at least our souls. If you can feel that experience of peace in your being, just repeat in your head, Om Shanti. As the yogis would believe, acknowledge the deva, acknowledge the divine presence. As a modern person would believe, acknowledge the uptake of serotonin and dopamine. Acknowledge the flood of positive hormones. With an exhale, release your wrist to your knees. Again, random finger to each thumb. Externalize the mind. Just listen to the world around you. Pay attention to your environment instead of your inner environment. The body's still buzzing. The world's still buzzing. Still alive. And with a breath in, open your eyes, keep your body in stillness, look out into the space in front of you, and try to keep that meditative state. I am still meditating. Blink your eyes, wash the trance away.